This is part two in our probably 5-part series on leaving corporate and going out on one's own. And so sometimes people are surprised about this journey and on a number of fronts. You either are you get laid off, so it's a choice that's not your own, or there's some sort of corporate restructuring and you were made redundant for one reason or another. You may be fired. You could be totally burned out. You could be forced to take a break through ageism or some sort of family situation. But there's a lot of different signals that can happen, but there's also a lot of signals that happen and can happen inside of yourself in terms of what are those signals that start to make you think about that it's time to go. How do you recognize when it's time to go, or how you go? And so just expanding on the travel analogy that I started in episode 1, this is kind of the wanderlust, where you start thinking about the call to adventure, like recognizing that I need to take another step. I need to pivot. I need to evolve in some sort of way. So in thinking about that in this journey of independence, now, what are the signals? What were the signals for you, Kathy, when you were in corporate and you said, hey, I'm going to do something different?
Yeah, there were a few things that came forward for me. I mean, one was that just I started to sense that my ambition was shifting. So I started to notice, like, it wasn't quite as important for me to get to the C-suite of a big company. That just started to not be my ambition. And I had always had a little bit of entrepreneurial tendencies. I think even growing up, I thought that I wanted to start a business at some point of my own. And it's why I ended up majoring in business in undergrad and graduate school. But the other thing about it with some of my ambition was that around this idea of both going out on my own, there was an ownership aspect of it as well, where I really kind of wanted to start to own my own creative output, and as well as be able to dedicate more of my time to my own creativity. So that was one signal that was happening for me, was just this sense of, my ambition is starting to shift here a little bit. So maybe maybe this is the time where I'm actually going to go ahead and step out from what I'm doing here on the corporate side.
And so what did that feel like? What did that decision feel like for you? Was it just like this, kind of gnawing at you? Or did it take a long time for that to happen? Or was it a matter of months where you got the sense and then you acted?
Oh, no. Yeah. It's a great thing to point out. Personally, I feel like transitions take more time than people realize. And I also think that people are having indications that a transition is coming way sooner than they realize. Like, if they were paying attention to how their body felt or some of the signals that were coming to them, they would actually start to realize, like, oh my gosh, this has been percolating for a year. If I were really to step back and look at things, and if they were paying attention, they would start to clue into those things instead of being like, it's now urgent, right? Where I can't stand this anymore. So for me, it was something that I had been thinking about for some time and planned for. And I think I was starting to notice the shift. And like I said, I think I always had a sense that I might want to do something out on my own. And so I was starting to explore for some time before I actually made the leap.
Did you, when you were employed full time, were you actually kind of moonlighting? Did you moonlight to kind of test those waters?
I did a little bit. I mean, certainly when I was still full-time employed. Well, let me pause for this for a second to think about this, because, in some of my jobs, to be honest, I worked so much, to be honest. The agency world, many people, especially your listeners, will know agency life is no joke. Like,
yeah,
right. I left a startup, and I remember telling people at one of my jobs, I left a startup and went to the agency world, and I said I was looking for more work-life balance, and they laughed at me, as they rightly as they rightly should have. Agency life is quite intense. So so when I was in that agency role, I really didn't have the capacity, frankly. And it was during that time that I was putting a lot of my own personal creative energy into content and thought leadership for that agency. And it's when I started to get this sense of, like, that's great. And they supported me in that and got me awareness through that thought leadership. But it also just started to feel like, at some point I wanted some of that for my own. was once I got into a different job, actually, where I had a little bit more capacity and I started to play with some of my own content creation and creativity and started to explore some options of going out on my own.